Welcome to an interview with Matt Struven. I'm the author, David Applegate, and welcome to an interview with a show where I interview creative people. This episode's guest is Matt Struven, filmmaker and author of The Secrets of the Erilaz. Matt, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. As mentioned, my name is Matt Struven. If you know me creatively, you might know me as MJ Struven. We like to, throw some of the initials in there, make me seem a little bit more special than I am. But I'm just a regular old Matt. I also do the Writers Are People 2 podcast. I'm taking a slight break from that right now, but I also interview authors. I've interviewed over 100 authors about their work. So yeah, writer, filmmaker, director, creative guy. I just love talking creativity. That's me in a nutshell.
Great. Yes, well, to get started, when did you realize you wanted to be a writer?
Well, let's see here. I think when I was 5 or 6 years old, my parents, without my knowledge, they put me into a poetry contest, and I wrote like a poem about the city that I grew up in, Goleta, California. And I just, I sat down one afternoon and scratched it out and then went and played with my Legos or something. Then a few months later, I found out that I won this poetry contest for 6-year-olds through our entire city. And so that was probably my first experience with writing. But I was more of a reader growing up all through elementary school. I used to read lots of C.S. Lewis, like The Lion, Witch, of the Wardrobe. I loved Brian Jacques, like the Redwall series. I just remember like reading tons and tons of these as I was a kid. And then I started trying to write my own short stories, and they're never as good as the books you read. Like I just remember being so discouraged writing for like 3 hours and coming up with like a page and a half. And so I kind of gave it up for a while, but then I very distinctly remember towards the end of high school, I got some inspiration for a book. It's actually not Secrets of the Erilaz. It's a separate project that I've still been working on. But at that time, I just remember being struck by the muses, and like, I really have this story inside me that I need to tell, that I need to get out. And so ever since high school, all through college, I kind of wrote a bunch, and I went to school actually to be an English major. And ever since I graduated college, I kind of been writing a little bit more consistently.
Yeah, tell us more about the Secrets of the Erilaz.
Yeah, so Secrets of the Erilaz. I'm sure you saw the thumbnail. Here's one of my author proof copies. I guess the glare on the screen and then this not for resale thing kind of ruins the whole image. But check out the thumbnail. Yeah. If you'll notice, the cover is a mage and he's holding 2 runes. And so I came up with this magic system. And I'm not going to divulge everything in the book. You have to read it. You got to pick it up and leave a nice review if you want to figure out everything. But it's the magic system involves runes and writing runes and communing with spirits in order to get magic done. And I'd never really come across a magic system quite like that. I'm not going to say that it's never been done before. Everything's been done in some unique creative's own way. But to paraphrase something I read one time, there's a difference between warlocks and magicians and mages and wizards. All these different classes that you might call of wizards, they all get their power from something else. So for example, again, I'm paraphrasing here, I don't remember all the specifics, but it's like a magician, they will cast spells to do their magic. And then a wizard, they have to read and study the arcane arts in order to do their magic. But someone who's a warlock is calling on a higher power in order to do the magic for them. And so my book kind of ties into that, calling into higher powers by writing these runes to enact change in the world around you.
Warlock, I actually writing about a warlock, so I know what you mean. Warlock means oathbreaker, and they have the power just by the power of their word. They can break oaths because oaths are spells.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I don't actually specifically refer to my magicians in this book as warlocks. That's just the concept that I drew from. They're actually called Erilaz. In the beginning of the book, I actually pulled the definition from Wikipedia here. I'll just read it to you right here. It's in the first page of the book. It says, Erilaz or Erilar is a migration period Proto-Norse word attested on various Eldar Futhark inscriptions, which has often been interpreted to mean magician or rune master. And so if you go to Wikipedia or do a little bit of research on the internet, you can find the Elder Futhark inscriptions. It's a bunch of runes from the north of Europe that they were able to do some translations off of. But, there's always been this sort of um, mystery and mystique around runes, and whether it was just a language or actually some magic being cast by these people who are writing them. So that's kind of where I got a lot of the inspiration from the book from.
Well, most of your rune stones were on ley lines and paths well travelled. Some were wishing travellers well. Some were warning travellers off. There's the runestone of the elves in the Black Forest. The Black Forest for a long time people wouldn't go into because of the rune markers saying "Traveller beware." Beware the elf. It's a legend, but it meant something to people once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I think
sure
all stories that are passed on, they're not just a story about something that happened. It's also a story about what the characters are going through. Like, okay, yes, at the core of every story, something happens to someone. But I think a lot of people, particularly in the modern day, they want to relate to the characters. They want to experience what the characters are experiencing and see how that relates to them in their own lives. So that's another thing that I have in my book is while it's a fantasy novel that talks about magic and things that are fantastical and runes, there's also a lot of it's a very character driven story. I follow three characters. I follow Narayan, who is he's, again, without giving away too much of the plot, he's a drunk and he's a womanizer, and he's the heir apparent to Satoria, and then his father is mysteriously killed, and he has the kingship of Satoria thrust upon him, and he has to learn how to run this kingdom while trying to combat his vices a little bit, we can say. And then another character we have is Einar. He's one of these Erilaz, and he shows up and he starts doing magic in this kingdom where it's a secular kingdom. They don't have any idea about magic existing, and they're all confused and like, what's going on? And in the midst of this, a war from their neighbor is declared on them because some things that I won't get into. You got to read the book. And then the final main character, her name is Sherry. She's a pseudo love interest to Narayan. They have a very unique and often conflicted relationship based on a lot of the choices that Narayan makes in this book. So, I'm following the character arcs of these three characters and the battles that they have to overcome in each of themselves, because in order to cast the magic, again, without getting too much into the book, you have to commune with your spirit. And if you have these things interfering between your body and your spirit, you can't quite cast the magic correctly.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Because you're going into synergy, the spirit, the character's actual personality, inner turmoils. There's a lot that could go on there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And what inspired you to write it?
Well, kind of like I was just alluding to, I feel like, particularly with Hollywood, there's a lot of bland and non-interesting characters. They're just like, let's throw a semi-interesting plot with a lot of flashing lights and some making out and then some violence and all that stuff, and then people will watch our movie. And I personally connect more with characters when I'm writing and when I'm reading. So I wanted to make characters that the reader could relate to and put themselves in those situations and really feel for these characters and the terrible things that they're going through, and then also consider the decisions that they make. A lot of these characters, they do things that are not moral. And I want to be clear, I did not write this as a glorification of immorality, more just to show that this is what people do often. And again, that kind of separates them from their spirit and doesn't allow them to cast the magic in some cases when they're being completely immoral. So, what really inspired me to do it, I think the message I was trying to get across was that there's a lot of things that are holding you and I back from our life and from success. Everybody in the world is being held back by something. One thing that Narayan struggles with is alcoholism. So perhaps alcoholism is holding someone back. And I'm trying to get my reader, whether it be alcoholism or not, or video games or porn or whatever it is, we all have our thing that's holding us back from success. We need to push that away so we can move forward with success in our lives.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think there isn't a person out there who doesn't believe at some point or other that something's holding them back. though a lot of people do externalize that, a lot of people do come to the realization every day. Someone says, my life got better when I quit smoking. My life got better when I quit womanizing. A lot of people said their life got better, particularly when they stopped overeating. They realized they were overeating and didn't realize how much of an impact vice has. I actually, in my book, I call them the 7 ruinous powers. They have power over you. They ruin you, And they are powers, Don't underestimate the power of vice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't really discuss the 7 deadly sins in this book at all, but the first section of this book, which follows Narayan, is literally called The Sinner. So, it's talking about all of his vices and how they control him and they don't allow him to do the things that he needs to do.
Does this bleed over into your filmmaking?
So this particular book does not yet. Someday, I would love to make a movie for this. The movie that you might be referring to is actually, it's literally called The Cardinal Sinner, and I touch a little bit more on some of those sins. That one is it's a little bit more grounded in reality, but it is a fantasy. There is a little bit of perhaps pseudo magic that goes in the background there. There is again, I don't want to ruin too much. There's a link in the description below if you want to check that out. But there's a Templar who's battling some of his inner demons, and he has to face some of the choices that he's made in the past and then make some difficult choices in the future. And he is literally called out for some of his actual cardinal sins that he has done to prove that he is not a very righteous person.
Are they connected canonically or just tangentially through concepts?
Yeah, I would say they're not connected at all, other than through the concepts that I just mentioned. It's two separate universes, 2 separate works.
But they are works that revolve around sin.
Yeah, exactly. And the point I'm trying to make here, and everybody has their own definition of what sin might be, or things that are sin in their own lives. My definition would be like things that separate you from your spirituality, or separate you from God, or separate you from other people. I think that is really what the heart of sin is. And so when you're doing things that are mean to other people, then you're sinning against them. And in a lot of cases, you can be sinning against yourself too, with some of the aforementioned vices.
Well, you mentioned magic, and I deal with particularly with a very complex set of different magic systems, and I know a lot about warlocks from research. Warlocks historically, Scottish, they were oath breakers. To them, oaths were spells that bound you and held you back, and they would free you. If particularly those who gave their oaths to lower powers, or made bargains with demons they couldn't get out of. Warlocks, witch doctors, whatever. There's every culture seems to have that concept of sin. And a lot of the vices overlap with various cultures. You look at Greek and alcoholism. You look at well, I think you'd find most cultures had alcoholism as a sin, not just because it well, I think a lot of it had to do with farm life. It did revolve around agriculture, taking from others, not contributing. It's an amazing area to explore. And like you said, separation from spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think magic also fascinates people. I mean, who doesn't want to turn invisible? Yeah. Sit there at the desk. The boss is coming. I'll turn invisible. He'll go away. I can get back to work.
Yeah. Well, and I think kind of building off of that, magic is so fascinating to people because I feel like a lot of us feel very powerless in our lives. Like you mentioned, the boss is coming and looking over our shoulder, or our parents are coming, or the government is coming. Whatever it is, we feel powerless. And so we're looking to this outer power to come and save us, which is this magic. But again, the theme that I'm trying to get across is that perhaps you have that power within yourself. You just need to stop focusing on the things that don't matter, whether it be alcohol or women or smoking or video games or whatever that thing is. You can focus your energy on something that you want to do instead of being stuck in this rut of being powerless.
Yeah, I think that's in a way. I mean, I think you would call filmmaking the modern magic. I really do. You're bringing stuff to life. You know, writers in the past, you know, fiction writers in particular, you know, pre-film. Then you had the radio era. And I think now filmmakers, of course, a lot of filmmakers feel threatened by AI because it threatens to take away their power. And I understand that. It can empower you, but it can also, it's one of those things, you know, it's a tool that can dramatically alter how you make a film, right? Make it easier to edit. But on the other hand, it can completely dehumanize your work and create mass production slop, and you end up with Avatar 26 being the blockbuster of the year.
Yeah, you know, AI is definitely a hot topic and it's interesting. I'm not going to take a side and say it's all good or it's all bad. I feel like there is some sort of middle ground where, you know, from the negative side, like you said, there's going to be a ton of AI slop out there, but I think that brings a lot of opportunity for true artists to let their actual creativity and their actual skills shine when comparing to this AI slop. And then, you know, from a positive side, perhaps I think it's bringing a gateway for small time creators such as yourself and such as myself to be able to do things that you could not do because your budget's too small. Like I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire actors and to shoot a book trailer, but I made a book trailer out of AI. Now, let's be clear, I wrote this book with zero AI. This was all my creativity and all my hard work, but I was able to take AI and leverage that and to create a book trailer, a 2-minute book trailer that, you know, gives an idea of what's going on in the book. You know, check out the book trailer below if you're interested.
Yeah, that's I included it because I think it's fascinating and it gives you, you know, like the reality of the story, shall I say, without giving it away. You know, but it's there. You can read the book later on, but first, I think you read the trailer, read the synopsis, decide the book for you. But if you really do, I you know, then go ahead. I always recommend people to, because I don't want people coming back at me and saying, I bought this book on your recommendation. There's always,
you can buy it on my recommendation. You know, it's funny because I was a very prolific reader growing up all through elementary school, junior high, high school, college. Like I literally have read the Lord of the Rings series 10 times. I love the Lord of the Rings, some of my favorite books of all time. And, you know, I love Tolkien. I love Orson Scott Card. I love sci-fi as well. Like I used to read a ton of Star Wars books. I love Asimov. Like I love such a huge different variety of works.
Gave me the bug.
Tolkien gave you the bug you said? Yeah. No, I love that. And so I was inspired by these writers to create my own. And I literally wrote the book that I wanted to read. And I actually left myself an Amazon review. You can do that. You're allowed to do that. You can leave yourself one review. And so I left myself a review that says you should read this book. I think
you can do it only once now.
I think it's just once, yeah. And so, because I bought the book, you know.
Yeah, you can buy your own book. That's fine. But I think if you've got multiple books out, I think you can only do it once. And it used to be on Amazon. There used to be a set of rules on Amazon, but I can't find it anymore. It's all over the place. But I mean, ultimately, it's being an Amazon author. You know, the stuff you can, can't do.
You know, I'm not an expert on all the Amazon rules, so don't take my word for it. But
don't take my word for it either. But I do know a lot of people have shilled for themselves in the past. You know, but it's true. We write the books that we want to read, right? I may meander like Tolkien. I'm not concise like Asimov. But then again, Asimov did write I, Robot, and look at that. So he can't. While The Foundation might be a very concise series, I, Robot certainly was not. It's a slog. Have you seen the original?
So I saw the movie. The book, I think the book was a series of short stories, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's like an encyclopedia, though. It's like a lot of unrelated, The only thing that relates them is it's all about robots.
Yeah. I
iRobot
read.
is near the end. The actual story, iRobot, is near the end.
I wouldn't say that I've read the entire thing. I've definitely read parts of it. I don't remember much other than the three laws of robotics. That's what I gleaned from that when I was in elementary school.
Yeah. The thing is, I took that out. I said, I'll give androids free will. I'll give AI limitations, right? And then I'll have the common robot having simulated intelligence. Simulated intelligence cannot learn, therefore it cannot be sentient, therefore it has no rights. But there is a property destruction law. You just can't turn around and destroy it because then if you start destroying robots, and social disorder from there. It's an anti-dysfunction law, like to prevent reactionaryism to robotics. And robotics is starts to become very common. You have androids. They start off as a very low population. They're sentient. They're recognized as sentient. The elves have a law, the preservation of life. And so they consider robots life, so they don't have robotic laws on them other than the law, but they do have a life debt. See, because they're very expensive pieces of machinery. But how you can't enslave, slavery is against the law. Well, they do have but they do have a debtor system, so they put a life debt on androids. So I'm taking the concept of, I guess, anti-iRobot, where I think Asimov was looking at robots as the future, in some cases, the saviors of mankind, and I'm looking at the broader aspects. But someone said, "Hey, your book looks like a script," but I think every book is like that, right? I mean, and from your perspective as a filmmaker, do you see that? Do you see books as the beginnings of a script?
I do. And I think it's because when I'm reading the book, I'm seeing it visually. And especially, maybe I'm tainted if I've seen the movie ahead of time and then I read the book. But in some cases, it helps me understand a little bit about what's going on a little bit better. So it depends the book. Like, obviously, I was reading Lord of the Rings before the Lord of the Rings movies came out. But then when the movies came out, I started to understand a little bit better some of the character relationships and some of the scenery. And, they are not perfect movies. They're damn close, but they're not perfect. And they don't follow the books perfectly. But, back to your question, do I see books cinematically? Yes, absolutely. Especially when I'm writing, I tend to write a little bit more cinematically than some other people will do. And I take pride in my dialogue as well. I try and write the way people would speak to each other more naturally. And, when you're writing a screenplay, there's a lot more dialogue and character interaction than just description. The book, you can get inside someone's head. You can describe scenes, but in a screenplay, when you're writing it, you're mostly focusing on the verbiage between what people are speaking, and you very briefly set up a scene or a little bit of direction. So it's a very different writing process.
Yes, it is. And Frank Herbert gave scriptwriters a conundrum because a lot of his dialogue is internal. So when David Lynch, let's say, interpreted Dune, he gave those cutaways where you would see the close-up and then the speech without the mouth moving. That is the best cinematic, I think, ever done for somebody speaking to themselves. I think that, not every scene was the same way either. Not every cutaway was the same. No background, just straight headshot. Some were always slightly off. And I think I don't know. I think it does do better than Dutch angles for conveying discomfort. And internal dialogue, I think, is much better than the marked silence a lot of movies have, where they just
yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting because I don't get to meet that many screenwriters or directors, because most of them are shooting high for the moon straight off the bat.
Hmm.
And for a lot of people with writing, I think, like you said, um, reading the book before the movie is better. Except maybe, um, I think reading Olson Scott Card, sorry, the first time, it's hard, but after seeing the movie, it sort of gave this. It's sort of like, I think he assumed the writer knew. I think he assumed that the reader knew the writer's intention.
Hmm. I feel like Ender's Game specifically was ahead of its time. I don't
Yes,
know. Like, I mean, and again, when did it come out? Like maybe the mid early 80s, before I was born, most certainly. I started reading
it came
Ender's
out
Game.
before franchises were a big thing.
Uh-huh. I frankly I was disappointed with that movie. I saw it in theaters, and it's, from what I recall,
Yeah,
the movie started halfway through the book, and it
yes,
was not the same. It did not do the
it's
book
too
justice.
that's because the book is too big for a movie.
Hmm.
No, that's the problem with look at Dune. It's too big for one movie,
Yeah, cut into
and
three.
yet, and it's also a series. So there's a lot of stuff that's skipped, a lot of internal dialogue that is skipped, a lot of historical stuff that is skipped. Um,
Hmm.
the dialogue is more natural in the book, and by natural I mean people have long conversations. They just don't walk up to each other and go, "Hey, hey, we'll do this thing now. Yeah, we're on it."
Yeah.
Uh, you know the feeling. I'm sure you have a handbook somewhere that says if a scene goes over 5 minutes, it's too long.
Yeah. Well, if I get bored writing it, the person who's watching it or reading it's definitely going to get bored.
Yeah, but you know what I mean, right? Tolkien, um, Franco. There's a Franco, the guy who wrote The Godfather, Franco
Hmm.
Mazzurio,
I don't
um,
know.
Eco Benito. They are Tolkien. They're all known for pages of descriptions.
Yeah.
Like, um,
Well, to clarify a little bit here,
yeah,
Tolkien, one of my heroes, absolutely,
yes,
but I did not try and emulate him
no,
specifically.
no, I, no, no,
He
no.
he wrote the epic that I could never write, and he defined the genre, and I'm not going to try to replace him. I'm going to
You,
try and carve out my
yeah,
own niche. Like if
yeah,
if someone wants to read a book that goes into hundreds of years of history and the cultures and the languages and stuff, read Tolkien 100%. If you want to get a story about characters and the things that they're going through, and they're just a part of this story, then you should read my book.
yeah. I'm writing a story about the empire and its ruling class, and if I mean, a lot of people don't understand that power is a game, and it's actually Power Games is my second book, and power is a game is the theme, and I think a lot of people don't understand that's specifically how politicians they go into this. They walk. One walks on the left side of the aisle, one walks on the right side of the aisle, but it's the same room. They
Yeah,
don't have friends; they have each other. you
yeah,
know. Um, but from a movie perspective, again, Tolkien would be hard. All of them are hard. The Name of the Rose is uh, Iberto. I'm not doing his name justice. He wrote In the Name of the Rose. He wrote other books. They're all epics. They're all, conspiratorial, secret societies, uh, familiar ties that bond, that turn tragic. Very very Italian tragic operas. And I think when it comes to filmmaking, and I'm sure you understand that the audience time, when also Scott Gard books were talked about, all being adapted. It was unheard of back then. But Ender's Game, I think, disappointed because it was still at that time where 90 minutes was the runtime. Heat broke that rule. I don't know if you've seen or heard of that movie, Heat.
I don't think so, no.
Robert De Niro, very, very, it's a classic robbery gone wrong story, and it brings down the heat, and then you have De Niro, and it's the first time De Niro and Al Pacino were in a scene together, and it rewrote the rules of Hollywood because it turned movies longer. Right, this is where you get the 2 and 3 hour movies from. Was the success of Heat. They tried to replicate that with the next movie, Miami Vice, which did not work, simply because it's like you said before, you can't replicate Tolkien.
Yeah.
If you want to, but remember, if you want to write it, don't forget Tolkien sat down for 20 years after writing The Hobbit just to outline. Just to outline.
Well, he created a language and then said, I guess I should write a book for it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he said, my children are growing up now. I can't write them bedtime stories, because that's what The Hobbit was. It was a series of bedtime stories that he came up with. And then, from there, Christopher could close his eyes and sight off all of the Hobbit. And he said, don't ask me to do that with Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
He says his father would be there, for hours from sunrise to sunset, hunched over the desk and mumbling to himself in Elvish as he wrote. Well, you got to put a language to use, right?
Yeah.
You made it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wish I could devote that kind of time to it, but my wife and daughter want to see me once in a while, so I just got to scratch out projects when they're sleeping.
Yeah. A lot of people don't understand the dedication sometimes, though. And I think that's why sometimes we do make it look easy. I mean, I was talking off screen before we started about that glorious shot you have in one of your trailers flying over the castle there.
Mm-hmm. That's in my book trailer.
Yeah. And I was thinking, wow, there's not a cloud, there's not a shadow, there's nothing out of place.
Well, amazing. As I was mentioning before, my book trailer was made with AI. But if you're referring to my short film, there was no AI used in my short film.
No, I'm talking about your short film trailer, not the one with the...
So if you're talking about the one with the castle in it, that is my book trailer, which I used AI for.
Oh, that is the book trailer, AI.
Yeah.
That's the one I was asking. Yeah, that was the one with AI. At first, I didn't pick up on that. Okay, I didn't pick up on that, but I still think the concept, it works, right? It still works. It conveys. You watch the trailer and then read his synopsis. They talk to each other. They talked to each other.
And I mean, the trailer, it's not supposed to tell the whole story. It's to pique your interest. It's to say, okay, here's a very generic plot. Oh man, that guy's doing magic. That's cool. Ooh, that chick's kind of hot. What's this guy doing? And then like, okay, now I want to read the book. Like the trailer is just to grab your attention.
Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff out there with, I remember runestones in many video games. It used to be very common when it was magic. Oh, yep, we'll bring up you'll have these runes, you have these runestones. When in your research, right, you probably did a lot of the same reading I did. Runestones, there were many different ways the Vikings used to use runes, way markers. Priests would wear a runestone around the neck to symbolize who was their god. And if you didn't know, he'd tell you, it'd sure make you remember him. Fire and brimstone, it didn't start with the Catholics. It started with the Nordics. They invented fire and brimstone, I think. You have any of that old world, new world conflict?
I don't. This takes place all, circa 1300s. This is just a good old medieval fantasy sword and sorcery. I build a little bit of a world, just enough to get you to understand, okay, there's two warring kingdoms.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, I'm not super focused on the world itself, because again, the world, I'm not telling a story about the world. Like, Tolkien was telling a story about Middle Earth.
Yes.
He had all of the cities and the history and the lineages and the languages
Yeah.
and, all of that stuff. But my book is not that. My book is a story
Yeah.
about people, and they live in a world, and I think it's an interesting world, but the world is not the focal point of the story. The characters are.
Yeah, just making sure, because although you did say it's character driven, but the setting, I just wanted to be precise. So when people go in, they know exactly what they're getting. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people, they want to pretty much know you before they get your book. You know what I mean? I think you could call it the J.K. Rowling effect, because a lot of people got to know her before and then bought the book. It's different. It's a different kind of it's a changing situation where I think in the past you could be a Grissom and nobody know a thing about you other than you're Grissom and you wrote these stories.
Yeah.
A lot
Well,
of
that
people
comes
didn't
into the
even know
whole.
his first name, and still
Yeah.
don't. They just see
Yeah.
Grissom, and John is actually in tiny letters.
Yeah, well, and I think that is a marker of the changing of what it means to be an author today versus what it meant 20 or 30 years ago. Because
Yeah.
20 or 30 years ago, you were traditionally published, and that was it. You had an agent, and then we found you a publisher, and then you sold your books and you made your career. Now there are, and I think it's for the positive, but with the advent of the internet and word processing and social media, where anyone can literally write a book and then market themselves, the market is almost oversaturated in some ways. So you really need to grab people's attention in special ways, such as coming on podcasts and talking about it and building book trailers. Whereas before, the big five just put out their books that they put out and people would buy them, and that was that. Now you really have to fight for attention space.
Yeah. And, used to be, who's your favorite book? Who's your favorite writer? That would be the extent of what people wanted to know about you. They didn't want to know your gender. They didn't want to know your politics. They didn't want to know your family life. You know what I mean? And then came the celebrity author, and I'm not saying J.K. Rowling was the first, but I'm just saying the modern phenomenon of modern marketing comes out of Harry Potter now, whereas in the past I think it was more the John Grisham style of self-advertising, where you just put your name in the biggest, boldest letters on your book, and as you passed the bookstore, it was like,
Yeah. To be fair, I don't think I could pick John Grisham out of a crowd. I could pick J.K. Rowling out of a crowd, but I don't know what John Grisham looks like. I did know his first name, though, so points for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people didn't even know his first name because his name was the tiniest font on the page, then the big Grissom, and then name a title even.
I can name a couple titles. The Testament is one of my favorites.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not saying his stories are forgettable. They make an impact. It's just, I think these days people are making more impact with self-marketing and themselves than they are their stories. I mean, that's what I'm saying. The new phenomenon is to market you, and then the book comes second. And I'm asking how it's impacted you, and obviously you've adopted some of those tactics already.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I actually started my podcast initially to try and get an audience interested in me and writing and what I'm doing and having other authors on to talk about it. Now, I would say ultimately the goal changed a little bit, because it started off kind of selfish. And then as I progressed, I was like, I really love talking to these authors. I really love hearing about their books. I love helping them and getting their stuff out there. I'm taking a little bit of a break from it right now because I need to finally focus on me. I've been focusing on other authors, 100 of them for the last 2 years. Now it's my turn. So I'm going to start getting on podcasts and talking about myself a little bit.
Yeah. But still, you are working on stuff, right? And
Yeah.
you got a current project you can talk about? Is there a sequel or a new
So I
film
have not
project?
yet started a sequel for Secrets of the Erilaz, though there will be one in the future. I have another story that is already finished, but needs a lot of work. And I've been saying this for a couple years now, but it was the first book I ever wrote. It's a sci-fi fantasy hybrid. Without giving too much away, someone finds a magical staff, and they're like prehistoric cavemen, and they find a magical staff, and the staff is more than it appears. We'll just leave it at that. You can buy the book when it comes out next year, whenever it comes out. So that's a long ongoing project. It's going to need a lot of work. I'm actually working on a short film script right now, so I'm mostly finished with the script, but nowhere even near production or anything. This one it's actually more grounded in reality. It's not a fantasy. It's not a sci-fi. It's more of a psychological horror. We'll just say that there is, gosh, I've never elevator pitched this one before. This is literally the first time I'm talking about it in public. So it's a family man who has marital strife between he and his wife, and his daughter is caught up in the mix, and things take a nefarious turn. We'll just say that.
There you go, folks. Now, what advice would you give to a new author? You did mention that the market is almost saturated. I think that's the Amazon effect. And by almost, I mean literally, I think you've understated, okay? I think you've literally understated. I think the market was saturated 14 years ago, and it's only gotten to the point where now we're seeing more authors retire themselves because the market, used to be you go, you write a few books, if you got a deal, you became rich. If you didn't, you still made a living. The minimum was, I think, once upon a time, you wrote a book and you'd make $10,000, and that's when the average wage is $7,999. But the average wages outpaced the income, whereas books, the income has fallen, except for the few.
Yeah. Well, to piggyback off that a little bit, yes, I would say it's oversaturated. And you said, what advice would I give to new authors? The advice I would give, there's a couple pieces. One, think about why you want to do it. If you're doing it for money, this is probably not the right thing. Now, yes, it is possible to make a huge amount of money if, like you mentioned, you get the huge deal and you get Amazon coming and buying the rights to it and making movies like that. That is absolutely a possibility. That's what I'm aiming for, right? But do not come in with that expectation. Come in with the expectation of, I'm doing this because I love it. Because in order to write a book, you have to literally sit your ass in a chair every day for a year or more. Like, this book took me about 2 years to write. My previous book that I was aforementioning with the staff, that one took me probably 2 years to write. So let's just call it an average of 2 years. Now, to be fair, this is not my full-time job. I have a job and I have a family to care for, and I have other hobbies and stuff. So this is a piece of my life. But in order to actually successfully write a book, you have to take it seriously. You have to take yourself seriously. Like, you can't just call into work some days and be like, I don't feel like doing it. Like, look at writing, if you're going to take it seriously, like a job. You show up when you don't feel like it. Even if it's just writing 100 words. 100 words is not that hard to pump out. You can do that in a few minutes, and you can call yourself good for the day. At least you put in the work for that day. But you have to sit down every day and do it if you're going to take it seriously. And then on top of that, that's just the beginning. Once you finish the book, the process has just finally started. You have to edit it. You have to find a cover artist. You have to put that together. You have to write the blurb. You have to do the marketing. All that stuff is stuff I'm still figuring out. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but
I would say 85% of writing a book is everything but writing the book.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
The editing, it's the covers, it's the marketing. Then it's the, oh my God, I've got to do a podcast. Did I say the same thing as I said on the previous podcast? Oh my God, my hair's out of place. Oh no, I'm old.
I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that. But you know what I mean, right? Oh, I'm old. I got this big bloody, I forget what they're called, Russia on my nose. And when it flares up, I look like Rudolph.
You just got to call your makeup crew in ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, all that to say, it's definitely a worthwhile endeavor. Like, one of the most gratifying experiences I ever had in my life was holding my book for the first time. The manifestation of two years of hard work and all of my creativity. Like literally waking up at 5 a.m. to write, staying up till 12 a.m. to write. Like it is an incredibly gratifying experience. So don't do it just for the money.
No, I was just, I would agree. I mean, I was just thinking, I've got all these stories to tell. Okay, I've played RPGs since I was 13. Right, I played video games, and I always ran into video games I didn't like. I think the stories were always cut and paste from each other. And having read Tolkien, right, I was given The Hobbit when I was, I think, 7. When I was 13, I said, "Mum, I'm bored. Gives me The Lord of the Rings to read." She was a fan of Tolkien. I've been to the opening night in Australia for both Star Wars and Star Trek the movie opening nights. It's because my mum was a sci-fi fan as well as a fantasy fan. That's why I write science fantasy, okay? I grew up on both. To me, of course, when it comes to giving writers to new advice, when I learn stuff, I make a video about it, you know? And people, even if 5 people say thank you, you know, it is gratifying, isn't it, you know? Mm-hmm. And absolutely. I've gotten a few 5-star reviews, and I've actually met a real life Netflix writer, and they are as they definitely represent the current, the big capital N, that impact that the big capital N has. They definitely represent that. You know, you're talking to people who make $300,000 a year, and they have that, big capital N attitude, And, it's unfortunate, but those are the writers who definitely came in and says, "I'm going to squeeze this and milk it for everything it's worth," And
well, I'd like to think that I have high aspirations. Of course, I'd hope you see my name on a Netflix screen someday. But I'd also like to remember the humble beginnings that I came from, and all the people that I chatted with on the podcast while I'm trying to bootstrap, and all the hard nights I put in, and the realization that everybody starts from the bottom and works their way up.
Because to me, there's a lot of writers out there who came in with high expectations, and sure, some of them have written amazing stories, and they're upset that nobody's got to read them. Well, welcome to the club of 9 million hopefuls, And there's only how many movies made a year? There's 556 productions, and I think only 10% of those are movies. I think, and of course, if you look at it, Netflix and Amazon, they're now looking at series, not movies, or movies as a series. They're not looking at once-off deals anymore. So if you got this amazing book, well, guess what?
Better write a sequel.
Ask you what's next? What comes next?
Yeah.
And I don't like the way they've handled Tolkien, but that's what happens when you become a property or an IP or whatever we call it these days. But once the creator has lost control, that's the end of your creation, and it becomes a product.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's where we get into the nitty-gritty of creation, because all creation is stress. It all comes from stress. I think people don't understand it. Stress is aspiration. It is inspiration. It is your brain pushing you to. And how do you deal with it?
Through creativity, obviously. As I aforementioned some of the main characters' vices in my book.
Yeah.
Some of them, I do not struggle with those vices, but some of them, I do struggle with those vices. And some of them are representations of vices that I struggle with. So again, I'm almost enacting things that have happened to me in my life through my characters in writing this, and seeing the way that they behave when put in similar circumstances. And, again, I do not want to take I don't want someone to read this and think that I'm glorifying their often malicious behaviors. This is just a runaway of my character's choices when put in situations that perhaps I've experienced in the past. So let's just take alcohol for an example. I don't think I'm a heavy drinker or anything, but I used to play rugby for many years, and we drank a lot playing rugby. And maybe that's an American thing. It sounds like you're from Australia, is it?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's culturally
here.
the same.
No,
I'm sorry?
It's the culture of rugby. Okay, rugby.
So it is a culture of rugby then.
Yeah, it's a culture.
Because I've heard that if you take rugby seriously in other countries, then you don't drink. But we definitely drank when we played rugby.
People don't know. A lot of people don't know this, but football used to be sponsored by the breweries, and rugby was one day a footballer grabbing the ball and running through and pummeling the crowd. And of course, that appealed to the masses, the violence. Yeah. So they created an offshoot called. Originally, it was called rugger. Then it became rugby. And of course, being football, it continued that tradition of mostly being sponsored by breweries. So after the match, where did you go? For lunch at the brewery.
To the
pub. Well, breweries used to be pubs. The whole, we have an old brewery. You used to pull up the shutter and you go in and literally sit down to lunch in the main hall of the brewery, and literally in the back you can see the hops and all that getting loaded. It was a form of this is a tradition, but still I think most countries that play rugby, the drunks roll out to see the violence.
Yeah. Well, then, like you said, after the game, you meet at the brewery with the other club, and you leave all your animosity on the field, and you have a beer and you shake hands, and that is excellent. And don't get me wrong, I love having a nice cold beer, maybe even knocking a few of them back. But I just know so much of that period of my life was consumed by staying out until the bars were closing, 2, 3 in the morning, and then trying to find where else I could drink. And so it's this, again, not a glorification, but my characters are living their own life, but experiencing some of the same things I did. And again, I love beer, but it was not a productive period in my life. And so if we're trying to look at this through the lens of what demons are my characters overcoming, unproductivity is one of them that is enhanced by drinking too much alcohol.
That's the thing. Sloth was a sin before it was a Christian sin. It was a sin long before that. Mm-hmm. Particularly amongst, again, you're talking about the working class here, because the vast majority of sins and taboos didn't come from the upper classes, came out of the working classes. Don't be like the lazy men on the hill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then secondly, stress and creativity. I think every single creative person is looking to connect with other people. I think we're creative because we feel often misunderstood in our lives, whether it be in the past or currently. And we're reaching out through our creativity to try and find people that, that see the world the same way we do, that enjoy the same things we do. And so, I often feel the stress of being an outcast for some might call it strange hobbies, or, I'm a nerd and not all rugby players are nerds. So I felt outcast in that way a lot. So I'm looking to connect with those other people who are nerdy in the way that I am.
Would feel very at home.
Henry Cavill,
Hero Warhammer.
I've never played Warhammer, but I know that he used to play World of Warcraft or whatever.
It's rugby on a table. It's rugby on a table. Except now and again there's fist fights because there's no referee. That's the ref.
Well, I have another project that I just started. I'm only 5 chapters in, so I don't want to talk too much about it yet. Yeah. But if it gets turned into a movie, Cavill is going to be casted as the main character. I'll just say that right now.
Henry, keep yourself open. I'm just saying. The guy's ambitious. Come on. All right, but still, right. One of the things, if you become a writer for the social club, no, we're a bunch of introverts who have to become extroverts overnight to market our books, and then we go back to being introverts, because you cannot write a book and have a social life at the same time.
Yeah.
Because your characters get very jealous of you staying out late at night.
Yes. Yeah. No, and that it's really comes down to, like, what is your priority? And,
Yeah.
at the time when I was playing rugby and socializing and drinking all the time, that was my priority. And
Yeah.
writing perhaps fell on the wayside. And if I wanted to write, I would wake up at 5 before work and, write for a couple hours. And so
Yeah.
it was, what is your priority is how you spend your time is a good way to think about it.
Final thoughts. What do you like to do when you're not writing?
Well, we already talked about rugby. I'm mostly retired now, have a few injuries that I'm nursing myself from. I'm not going to say I'm never going to play again, maybe just a few games here and there, but I got to get back in shape for that. And then, I'm a huge nerd. You can see behind me, I have the helm of the Mandalorian. And then we have over
Halo.
here, if I could,
Master
Halo,
Chief.
exactly, Master Chief. And then we have over here, God, if I could learn how to point, this is the helm of Elendil from Lord of the Rings. And then over here, this is the helm of the Dovahkiin from Skyrim. So I love me some good nerdy video games.
Oh, Skyrim helm.
Yeah.
Oh, envy. That is probably the most, iconic helmet. Used to be the Spartan helmet, which of course was copied into, like you said, Lord of the Rings. That's straight out of the Spartan warrior helmet. Although I think this is weird. It's probably one of the longest running helms in actual fantasy. The Greek helm was used from the Greek period all the way up to the Crusades. The Greek helm was one of the oldest. Then it was replaced by the Norman helm, which a lot of people associate the angular conical helm, or the weird. Weird design, but when you're
it's made so that the sword it slides right off of it if it's hit by something. Yeah.
Well, you're living in a time where decapitation was the most common form of combat, because if you're in large groups, the only way to survive was to spin that sword around and lob off heads. So yeah, the helm was the most important, but Master Chief, that's pretty much also an iconic helm. The cool motorcycle helmet, basically. Cross between Easy Rider and trying to think of that war movie where tanker type, big rugged helmet. But there's a lot of movies like that. Though these days, actors, nope, off, no helmet. I want my face on the screen. I'm Henry Cavill.
Yeah, careful. Got to get your head chopped off real quick if you did that in real life.
Oh, yeah. So, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. All I could say is I hope people buy your book.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the conversation, and I'll catch you around.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Okay, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.